Well, speaking about Germany here, just a couple of days after the war, there was the famous Zeitenwende speech in which it was declared that they are about to invest 100 billion into the army, and that this is a completely new phase of German rearmament. How do you assess the Zeitenwende so far?
Scholz made a speech, and as a German speaker, I understood what he said, and he was like, we will spend 100 billion to close the gap of the last 20 years when we underspent the military. So we have 100 billion to buy equipment we didn't buy yet. And we will spend 2% of GDP on defense. So it was 2% plus 100 billion for new equipment. And a few days later, he was like, yeah, never said 2%, we're just pretending. And then they reduced the defense budget even further. They went down, the Germans, because they take now their 100 billion to close the gap. Guess what? Just when the next German elections are happening, the 100 billion fund is running out. So the next parliament, the first decision will be to actually then really truly raise German defense spending from 1.4, 1.5% to 2% or not. And Scholz's hope is that by then the war in Ukraine is over and the Germans can go back to be the just absolute treasonous liars about their defense spending. Because right now it's a joke what they're doing, and the Germans don't understand that every European defense official can read. Imagine that. And they look at that and they understand what they're doing. They're using 100 billion to pretend to spend 2%, when in fact the base budget for the military has been reduced under Scholz in this year and the year before. So it's a fake 2% reaching goal, because to really be able to contribute meaningful to NATO and Europe's defense, the German would have to spend 2% plus 100 billion. And now let me do a quick detour here. I had a discussion yesterday with Polish security officials, and we understand that countries like, for example, the Netherlands or Germany or Denmark have manpower issues. If they spend 2% on defense, they wouldn't find enough people willing to join the military because there are so much job opportunities around. So the idea is that Germany and the Netherlands spend 2% on defense, but since their militaries can only use 1.6 or 1.7% of that, the remaining money is used to buy weapons from the German industry and the Dutch industry, and these weapons are donated to countries like Poland, Slovakia, and Czechia, who don't have that much money to buy equipment. And you know who has been doing this? Denmark. Denmark is spending 2% of GDP on defense. But a third of that money is buying weapons from other countries and donating them to Ukraine. So the idea with the Polish and I discussed here were that couldn't we convince countries like Germany, Netherlands, Luxembourg that have a lot of money and issues with recruiting, convince them to spend the 2% or even more, and what their militaries cannot use, which would be billions a year, turn this money into Eurofighters for Poland, Leopard 2A7 tanks for Romania, Puma infantry fighting vehicles for Bulgaria. Because if that happens, everybody spends 2%. It's a just system, and the countries further east who are threatened most would get the best equipment they need.
And in turn, they could send over whatever equipment they have still
to Ukraine. And more importantly, who would profit from that? The German workers, because that money would go 100% to German workers to produce weapons for Eastern Europeans. So there are ways to do it if you are willing, and you could see in Denmark, they decided we will do it. So also Denmark, again, doesn't have the euro and is free to do it without problems. The euro is a nice thing, but it is also restraining nations in a time of need, and that's a problem.
And the ECB is located in Frankfurt, so a lot of those decisions are taken in Germany. Speaking about Germany here as well, you mentioned previously that the other defense experts across Europe, they know how to read, they see the German plans, they understand what is happening. How would you say that this impacts Germany's standing in countries such as the Baltic states, Czechia? These are countries who used to look to Germany for security, not guarantees, but at least for helping them in security issues. Do they still have confidence in Germany in case there would be a conflict in the future, or will they be only looking to America or potentially other actors?
The problem is that in Germany and America, the political system is endangered. In Germany, from the left, the pro-Putins on the left and the pro-Putins on the right. So there's this. The communists and the fascists align in Germany on the point that they love Putin. In the US, you have a Republican Party, which as a party has a lot of people who are still very pro-European, Atlantic cooperation and so on. But you have the strongest candidate of them that is a complete loon and a danger to the Western alliances. So honestly, the countries in Europe you should look to, if you need a land power protection, it's Poland. If you need a navy, look to Italy. If you need air power, the UK. And what the Scandinavians have been doing, they will merge their air forces. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland will merge their air forces to create a much more powerful air combat force, because the Norwegian air bases are safe, out of Russian range. So in worst case scenario, the Finns can cross over to their safe bases, and from there, together with the Swedes and Danish and the Norwegians, attack Russian formations.
And they are all buying F-35s in enormous quantities.
Yes.
Finland 64, I believe, Norway 52. Sweden is also going to buy...
The Gripen E, the national version, but I think they wanted to buy 60, but they're going to double it likely. Submarines and so on. So the European nation, we also spoke with that about the Polish security officials yesterday. There would be a very good case for European nations to merge certain functions. You don't have to merge the Norwegian Air Force and the Swedish Air Force. But if you combine the Air Operations Command that is tasked with defending all these nations, you improve the ability to defend because you have so many more fighters and bases from where to launch them. The 3 Baltic nations, if they would merge all their air defense arms, it would increase their ability to defend their air defenses, their airspace, and so on. For example, Poland should try to get the Italians and the Spanish to put a battalion at least into Poland and have them fight the Russians in the first line to bring these countries in. But merge what you can. For example, on example we spoke about, there is an Italian Alpine Troops Command with the Spanish and the French, Italians, the Austrians, the Slovak, the Slovenians, the Polish, and these countries, and the Romanians having mountain troops. You cannot merge them. They're too different in history and traditions, but you can combine their training and doctrines into one command that will exercise them together. You cut down on expenses, you increase interoperability, you get a better training regime for these specific units. So the Europeans need to understand that merging key functions is so important. And Poland and the Baltics need to lead the way, because if Poland can basically get with the Czechs and the Slovakians into a air defense relationship like the Scandinavians, then even if Polish air bases are struck by Russian missiles out of Kaliningrad or out of Belarus, Poland can evacuate its fighters to Czechia, and you have a joint air command that can from there fight back. NATO Air Command for Poland is in Uedem in Germany, but still you will have to have local commands. And during the Cold War, NATO had bases closer to the front and then bases further back. And in case the bases out front would be attacked, they could fall back. And in Germany, the Canadian, the US Air Force, the German Air Force, the French Air Force in the south were in one command, unified. And in the north of Germany, the Dutch, the Belgians, the British, the German, some American units were unified in one command. Always with bases further stacked back. So they could fall back, bases in Western Germany, bases in the Netherlands, bases in Belgium, bases in France. So this merger doesn't mean that Poland loses control of its forces. It's just combining that aspects that will allow Poland or the Scandinavians or maybe Romania, Bulgaria to better withstand an attack.